So hello and welcome to It's Never Too Late, the podcast where we explore the inspiring journeys of women who have embraced change, achieved remarkable things and followed their dreams in midlife and beyond. I'm Clare Roberts-Molloy, Midlife Mindset Coach, and in each episode I'll be speaking with women who prove that age is just a number and it's never too late to chase your goals. Today, I'm joined by the marvellous Loretta Milan, podcaster and communication expert. Loretta is the host of the Origineurs podcast and is passionate about inspiring people to tap into the power of their originality to do amazing things. She's also an award-winning communication expert who has been helping people stand out and succeed in original ways for over 20 years, including leaders of global brands, entrepreneurs, and change makers. So today we're going to talk about everything she's achieved, her outlook on how life has changed, and the advice she has for anyone who feels it might be too late to pursue their dreams. So let's dive straight in. So welcome, Loretta. Can you introduce yourselves a little bit more than I've just done and tell us about what you've achieved since you've turned 40 and what turning 40 really meant for you?
Well, that's a very big question. I'm 42, so I'm 2 years in to my 40s, which is very new to being 40, I suppose. What can I say I've achieved since being 40? Well, the big thing is the podcast, because that's enabled me to really explore something that's important to me, which is through the podcast, enabling people to really explore what originality is, what's special about them. And your originality is the accumulation of all the skills, experience, the wisdom, your attributes, your values, all in one brilliant package. And I believe that the more you age, so if you're 90, you're almost the most original you can be, because you accumulate originality through your life. And this is something I've always wanted to do. So my 40s was a brilliant opportunity to make a start on that. So I'm 2 years in.
Amazing. And I love this idea of the Origineurs podcast and this word around originality. And I think it can be a really loaded word for some people.
For sure, yeah.
Have you found that when you've spoken to women in particular about how original are you? What's been the response to that?
Yeah, it always needs explaining because if you say originality, people very usually assume I'm talking about creativity, like how creative are you? So it always starts a conversation. That's how I think about it. It's like a little firework going off. It's a conversation starter. What does it have around women? Well, I think a lot of people don't necessarily think of themselves as being originals. They think originals are the astronauts that fly into space, and they're the top elite sportswomen who are running the 100 meters in the Olympics, and those are the originals in the world. I think they're quite surprised when I say that originals can be everyday people like you and me doing great things in the world. And what an Origineur is, which is a version of Originals, are people who take what's original about them and use that to do amazing things. And many of us are doing that already. And that's a surprising thing that people have when we have a conversation about originality. Yeah.
And I was just having a discussion with my daughter just yesterday, and we were talking about the stories that people have. Your everyday person on the street, you might pass them without giving them a second glance. You might write them off. But if you stop to speak to them, what stories everybody would have on their unique journey. And so we are original. We just don't necessarily sort of label ourselves in that way, I suppose. But there was another example recently around this loaded word, and I don't know whether it says more about me than anything else, Loretta, to be honest with you. But someone asked me, what do I do for fun? And it immediately stopped me in my tracks. And it's one of those words that feels to me almost like a judged word. Like, are you a fun person? Are you a creative person? Are you an original person? So yeah, when you were having conversations with women, how do you overcome that natural sort of questioning around their own abilities? How do you draw that originality out of them?
Well, the fun, I love this idea of loaded questions, by the way, because I'm a linguist by nature, having a communication background. So the idea of talking about words is brilliant. I think when someone asks a woman, what do you do for fun? It's like the question, do you have a work-life balance? That's often asked to women more than it is to men. And as you say, it's very loaded with judgment. It's almost like, how do you do it all? Men rarely get asked that question. And I don't know why. It's like, if you're a working woman or a business owning woman, how can you possibly have a life at the same time? How can you possibly do things? And one of the things I did when I turned 40 and my partner turned 60 at the same time, I set myself a challenge to do 40 new things, because I was conscious that I wasn't always making time for some fun things. And it gave me a chance to do some fun things and also have the courage to do some things that I hadn't tried before. And one of those things was setting up the podcast, but I also traveled to some places that I hadn't traveled before. I went to South Africa and saw some animals. Somewhere I'd always wanted to go was California. But I did some things that were more grounded, like making my own ice cream for the first time. And we made jam using some plums on our plum tree that had been making plums every year, but we'd never got around to making jam from it. Going for walks, places we hadn't been before and things like that. I had wanted to do a skydive, but I fell and hurt my head. And it was a bit worse than maybe it should have been. So it put a skydive out of the work. So instead I went on a seaplane. That was because I find that was a scary thing to do. Wow. So going on a seaplane was the next best thing to going on a skydive. Not as scary, but in the right realms.
Well, as I like to say, it's never too late for that skydive. So
no, that's right.
It's on my bucket list as well.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. And we have these lists, don't we? Of things that we want to achieve. I mean, I call it a bucket list. People call it all sorts of different things. And so what was it about turning 40 that you thought, that's it, there's all these things on my list that I want to do or try, or I've never done, let me experience it? Why do you think turning 40 is such a pivotal point in sort of our mindset?
Well, I saw lots of my friends who were about to turn 40 going, oh, I'm going to be 40. And they were trying to get lots of things done before they were 40. And I thought to myself, I don't want to see 40 as being this thing that's something I don't want to look forward to. I want to see the 40 as being the start of doing something. So that's why I started doing things at 40. And I saw it as something to look forward to rather than something as a decade that was another decade older and something not to look forward to. So that's why I was giving myself to look forward to doing these things in this decade. And that's why I approached it that way.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think when you turn any decade, really, I remember dreading my turning 30. That just felt so old. And then turning 40 felt really pivotal. And I felt this pressure of, probably similar to the friends you were speaking to, gosh, what have I actually achieved? I'm turning 40. What have I done with my life? There was this big question. But like you're currently doing, I decided to flip that narrative and turn my 40 into my best decade ever. And I've thoroughly loved my 40s, and I'll be turning 50 in 2.5 years, and it would be so easy to go, oh my goodness, I'm going to be so old. But I'm thinking, well, if this has been my 40s, bring on my 50s, because I absolutely can't wait. And it's that flipping mind, isn't it? So in that list, were there any what I like to call lingering dreams from when you were younger that you decided to take on? So when I speak to, and I'll explain that a little bit, because if you haven't come across the concept before, but I speak to a lot of women who, when they were in their teenage years or in their 20s, had all these big ideas, had all these big ambitions, and then life got in the way. And we know life gets in the way with work, with kids, with households, everything else. But those dreams linger in the back of your head. Some people take action to make them come true. Others don't, and they just leave them lingering for the rest of their lives. So did you have any lingering dreams on your list, or do you still have lingering dreams that you're yet to achieve?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I know lots of people who live with the regret of lingering dreams. And when I was in my 30s, because I run my own business, that allows the freedom to do some of these things that you really want to do. Mm. And so I had a go at doing some of these things I really want to do in my 30s. Like I tried writing novels. I tried setting up my own stationery range and things like this. And I got out of my system some of the things I'd wanted to do when I was younger that were in my system that I really wanted to do. And they didn't bring me the fulfillment that I thought they would.
Wow. Okay.
And that was really interesting. And I was really disappointed by that, because there'd always been this dream for me. And I thought there'd be this amazing thing. And it was such a strange feeling when they didn't bring me there. And it left me really lost for a while. Okay. And I didn't know where to go at that point when they didn't work out the way that I'd planned them out to be. And I had to go back to the drawing board, which is how I then stumbled upon the idea of originality, because I had to go back and look at all the ingredients of who I was and what had accumulated over the years to figure out where I wanted to go and who I was and who I really was, based on everything that I developed. And off the back of that, I realized that some people really know what they want to do. And between me and my partner, we have 5 children. And out of those 5, 2 really knew what they really wanted to do, and they're doing it. So my one of my partner's sons wants to be a civil engineer, and he's doing it, and he's doing brilliantly. And his daughter wanted to go into musical theatre, and she's doing brilliantly at that. And the other 3 have had to go on a bit of a journey of discovery. And that's what I've had to do myself. And that's led me to having a career in communication, which has evolved over the years. And now embarking upon a master's in psychology, because I realised the thread that's connected me all over the years between having an interest in communication, having an interest in writing and linguistics, and having an interest in people, and having an interest in podcasting, because that allows me to meet people, having an interest in originality. The thing that connects them all is my interest in psychology and the way the mind works and what makes us tick. And so now at 40, I've embraced going back to university to study that very thing. And when I was 16, if someone said to me, you're going to go back to university and study science, because I'm doing psychological science, I would have told them they were mad. I would have said they're insane. I'm going to go back to science. I couldn't wait to drop science, and I could not wait to drop math at 16. But now it lights me up, because I have a purpose behind it. And now it makes sense. In a way, it didn't make sense to me back then, because I didn't have a purpose for doing maths and science. But now I thrive off doing statistics and doing elements of biology, because I'm doing it with a reason. And so I've realised that for some people, they really have this dream and it makes sense to them. And for other people, don't be scared if there's no blackboard in the sky in the sense of a purpose, because for some people, there's an exploration, and you'll come to some discovery at some point. It might be in your 30s, it might be in your 40s, it might be in your 50s. And guess what? This is why you've got the most brilliant podcast, Claire, because it's never too late to discover your purpose.
It's like we planned that or something, or rehearsed it. But no, I mean, that is a really, really important message. That you've just, and sharing your journey there. I think that highlights where a lot of people are. But you said a few key words that are really important. and one was evolution, and one
Yeah.
was the thread that holds everything together.
Yes.
And I think there's this huge amount of pressure to know what you want to do at a really young age. And as you said, people are born with that really innately, aren't they? And I went to school with someone who knew exactly what she wanted to do from the age of 4. She just knew, and she went and she did it, and she's doing it now, nearly, with 50 in her sight. She's been doing the thing that she just knew from tiny what she wanted.
Amazing.
Which is great for people who have that.
Yeah.
But it's okay not to have it as well. And I think that's the really important message. It's okay not to have it, because sometimes the squiggly careers are where you follow this weird thread that you might not even know what thread you are following, is where where that originality comes from, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're talking about. And for me, I didn't have that big idea of what I wanted to do. I had a vague idea, but actually I had no words to articulate it. I had no role models to model it for me. And I had no examples from my background showing me what it could be. It was just completely outside of my sphere of influence at the time. So I've got there through a really, really squiggly route. And like yourself, you reflect on, well, what is that thread that's pulling everything together? And I sat down and looked at everything I did, everything that lit me up inside and everything I felt passionate about. And it was working with women to unlock all their potential. Because and I found I was doing it in everything I do, whether it was charity work, volunteering, professional work, my businesses, everything had that thread of potential running through it. So yours is originality and mine is potential. And I think they make really great partners, don't they? They do.
They do.
So talk me through your squiggly career then. So you've just mentioned some of it. So how did 16-year-old Loretta, who dropped all the sciences at school, what was the path that you followed to get you to where you are today?
Well, I remember sitting down with a brilliant careers advisor saying, I don't know what to do. And I knew 2 things. One, that I loved being creative, which I do. I loved art. I loved creative writing. But I wanted to do a career where I made money. And the reason for that is I knew someone that had done a fine art degree and was homeless and was really struggling. And I thought, I don't want that to be me. And I'd made the false assumption, because I was only 16 and I didn't have a lot of people giving me guidance at the time, that if you did art, there were very few careers in art. So I didn't have the idea that there were lots of ways of making money in art. So I said, I need to do something that's maybe more commercial. So I remember her sitting down with loads of ideas for me, product design and other things. And we settled on marketing being an idea. And I did. So I ended up doing English language A-level and business studies. And I progressed to doing a marketing degree. And I had an option to do a placement. And at the time, I worked in Bristol, and I was always fascinated by all the aircraft flying over the university where I was. And it turned out Airbus was there. And I thought, I really want to work there. Something's really magical happening there. And I saw that popped up on the placement advertising system that Airbus were looking for communication people in their PR department. And PR wasn't really aligned with marketing, which is what I really wanted to do, because marketing I saw as being more creative and PR was more sort of communication work. But I said, well, I really want to be there. So I followed my instinct and went for the job and got it. And it was a really varied placement. It got me traveling around Europe and doing some really exciting things. And that's what got me into the career doing communication. And I found that I really enjoyed that. Through that, it wasn't doing all the kind of creative advertising stuff that I'd imagined myself doing, but had been doing a lot more writing and working with people. And I found how much I enjoyed that, because you really had to get into the minds of people and understand how they tick, but also the minds of audiences that you're communicating to, and understanding what motivates them, what switches them on. And I find that really exciting. So from there, I worked for Airbus for a number of years, and I loved working there with so many people from different countries. I worked for a FTSE 100 company. I worked in automotive. And then 10 years ago, I set up my own consultancy, and I worked for a variety of different companies. And that's when I started working for SMEs for the first time. And that was a big shift, because I went from working for corporate companies where you were a cog in a machine and you did the PR bit, and the PR communication bit, and there were other people who did other things. And all of a sudden, it was a lot more dynamic. You had to move a lot faster, because SMEs move a lot faster. And I had to learn very quickly a different way of doing things. And I had to learn about cash flow as well.
Always
because
king.
Cash is king for sure. Yeah. I had a few days where I maybe didn't eat, let's say, because I realized that very quickly you have to store up cash for the days where people don't pay you on time, or maybe pay you 90 days late.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Things like that. So I think I learned way more in the 10 years working for myself. I've worked for some amazing people in my 10 years working for business, some really wise people, and some really clever people in the last 10 years of working for myself. And I've loved it. I also collaborate with a lot of designers, video people who have been absolutely fantastic. So it's been a really varied journey, and it's been totally non-linear. It's been absolutely squiggly. And one of the reasons it's been so non-linear is because I had my kids while I was at university.
Right. Okay.
And so one of the drivers for me was always providing for my kids. So I always had to do that first. So I had to take the role that was best suited to providing for my family, providing security for them. And that came first. And when I took the role to start my business, it was very much because my kids had dyslexia and they needed my time to support them with their education. And running my own business did give me that time. So I couldn't follow that traditional ladder model of going up the ladder. I had to do that and find creative ways around my career to serve my family first.
And I think, as parents, we do that, but I think there's often an additional pressure on mothers in particular to do that. And so you're either taking the job that fits your family, or like you've done, and I've come to the conclusion, actually running my own business was the best fit for my family. It was. Because it gives you the flexibility, doesn't it, and the freedom and everything else, as long as you can keep that cash flow going, which is always one of the big challenges. You mentioned, as you were sharing there, that there were lots of people who you've worked with who influenced you along the way, and you've worked with some really great sounding people. So who have been those role models for you, particularly as you've moved into being a business owner? Who have been and continue to be role models for you?
Well, one of the top ones is my partner, because he's been in a similar industry to me, and he is the total opposite to me. And I remember when we worked together, working in the same company, when we got together, everyone was so surprised that the two of us became a couple, because we are so different. But that combination of thinking, because he is so different to me, is so handy, because he challenges my thinking so much. And that stops me being overly spontaneous or going down a track. It allows me not, to question my thinking and make sure I'm doing the right thing, especially when I'm making massive life decisions, like some of the pivotal things I did when I was 40. So he has been a massive role model as well as being a supportive partner. Who else has been a massive role model? And interestingly, I've just recorded an amazing podcast episode with one of my guests where we talked about role models and how lots of people look to big celebrities and big like celebrity entrepreneurs and stuff as being role models. And we were talking about how some of the best stars in our lives are the people who are closest to home. Definitely. And like, for example, one of the chief executives for one of the clients I work for is a brilliant role model because he's actually such a measured person, really thinks things through, is really diplomatic, so good at like being diplomatic with lots of people and making really measured decisions. And I really value that, like people who can make really great decisions. That was a really good thing. I know other people who are really good at collaboration. And when I think about people who are role models, I think it really depends on the context. Like I look up to certain people for like creativity. Then there are other people, it's about their ability to think really strategically. And then there are other people who it's their kindness. I think there's a friend I went to school with, and she wasn't the best academic performer, and she rarely got great feedback from schools, and she used to feel really upset about that. And no one saw her potential. And I think I maybe have talked about this on the Origineurs podcast, because she's gone on to be an amazing paramedic. And that was her originality gift, because her kindness has been the thing that's allowed her to be an amazing paramedic. So I think when I think about role models, everyone's got like a gift that we can look up to them for. And I think I've probably got 100 role models that I look up to people about different things.
Yeah. And I think probably using the term role model again is probably coming back to my thing at the beginning around loaded words and phrases. There's this pressure if someone goes, who's your role model?
To be
you feel this
person.
Like, pressure to pick this amazing person. But you say, actually, looking at those role models around us in our everyday lives and becoming that role model for other people that other people can look up to, I think is great, is a great aspiration.
I haven't forgotten one special name, and that's my granddad. My granddad is the original. He's originator in my life. Probably when I thought about originator, he's the first person I thought of. He died at 92, and he was still learning. And he started with nothing. He didn't even own his own house practically, and he was a farmer. And he got to a point where he built up 3 really large farms. He supplied all the supermarkets, but he was still really grounded. He loved travel, had a really varied life with my nan. And I could learn so much from him. He was a really dynamic guy. You look back, he probably had something like ADHD. He could only talk and focus on about 3 topics. And that was, he was interested in shares, he was interested in farming, and he was interested in singing in his Welsh male voice choir. And unless you talked about those 3 things, he could not focus at all. And so he was super focused on those, did brilliant on those, and then everything else he just couldn't do. And he was a most brilliant guy. And yes, I would say he was the original originator in my mind.
Fantastic. Because I know we've spoken before, Loretta, and you've mentioned how impactful and how the guidance that you've got from your grandparents growing up and how important they are and have been in your life. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So we are coming to the end, but I do want to ask you.
Okay.
You're into your 40s. You've done some amazing things in your 30s. You're at the beginning of your 40s, and you've done some amazing things at the beginning of your 40s. What's next for you?
What's next for me? I think the key thing that's next, that is a loaded question because that relies on us to see into the future. And I used to like make these grand plans, these grand And I remember when I was in my corporate days, I think it must have been in about 2006. I was tasked with helping to launch the company's 2020 vision. And we all had these grand plans for what the company was going to be achieving in 2020. And then look what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
So I always have a bit of caution around predicting exactly what's going to happen in the future, because I know life is subject to the change and life is subject to exploration. But I can say what I'd love to happen. And that's, I'd love to do something amazing with the Origineurs podcast to help really build a community around that, so that I can help people, inspire people to really celebrate the originality in them and get more people doing that, because there's so many people who don't see what's special about them. And I'd love to get more people seeing that, celebrating that, and doing amazing things with that. I am going to be doing research around that. That's why I'm doing psychological sciences at university at 42. I really want to study that and put some science behind it, because I think it is such an important thing. It deserves some science and research behind it to back up why it's so important. So I will be doing all that. I will be growing that. And I'll be doing special things about it, because I believe there's so many millions of special people out there. And they deserve me spending time on that, because they are special enough. They are so special for me to spend time doing that.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I can't wait to see what you do and how you take it. And yeah, it's going to be amazing. So
yes,
thank you so much, Loretta, for sharing your story and insights with us today. But before we wrap up, just one last question. And that is, and I hope this isn't too loaded for you, it seems to have been the word of the day, doesn't it? But what's the one piece of advice that you would give to anyone out there who's listening who feels it's too late to chase their dreams?
I would say, if you feel it's too late to chase your dream, first of all, it's not. So I would say approach it with curiosity. Look at it, and rather than look at it with a kind of closed door and say it's too late, open the door and see what's there, and ask yourself, what could I do with that? And just don't put pressure on yourself to say, I have to do this thing and make it this big thing, because that can feel really overwhelming. But what could it look like? And just sit there and ask yourself a series of questions, and just journal or meditate or whatever it is, and just allow yourself time to explore what that could be with just some open curiosity.
Love that. Love that. Curiosity. It's one of my favourite values and that I live by, and one of my favourite words. If you're curious, it doesn't often lead you wrong, does it? So whether that's your lifelong learning or just seeing what's possible for you, I think always approach with curiosity. Great advice. So thank you once again, Loretta. To our listeners, I hope today's conversation has reminded you that no matter where you are in life, it's never too late to follow your passion and achieve your goals. So until next time, keep believing in yourself, stay original, and believe in your dreams. Goodbye.